I often talk about government schools and the deep state media rewriting history so that the American public doesn't understand where the true power lies. Because if you can identify that power, you will also be able to study and confront it. It's also no secret that history is written by the winners. Armed with that knowledge, I'd like you to examine a moment in history that, when written immediately after it happened in the Mockingbird media and for the decades that preceded, was a complete fabrication. Lies that would be regurgitated and retold in books and television programs over and over and over again. Lies written by the winners in an unprovoked armed conflict involving the United States and a country in the Middle East. Not Iraq, not Iran, or even Saudi Arabia, but an attack perpetrated by Israel, unprovoked, on an unarmed naval ship in international waters, in an attack that claimed the lives of 34 American citizens and wounded 171. The attack on the USS Liberty on June 8, 1967. The USS Liberty was a naval intelligence ship monitoring the war brewing between Israel and Egypt. Surviving crew members who would be threatened into silence for decades now recall a clear sunny day with anger and confusion. At 10:30 a.m. that morning, an Israeli reconnaissance plane that had made visual contact and circled the vessel earlier in the day, along with several others beginning around 8 a.m., made visual contact again. The pilot circled so close that crew member Larry Weaver was able to wave and recalls the pilot waving back and smiling.
They were slowly lumbering over our ship, and we were waving at them, they were waving at us. And I felt that we were in great shape because they knew who we were. We had an American flag flying, the standard, and then we put up the holiday colors, which is a huge American flag. And it was a bright sunny day with the wind blowing, 5 or 10 knots, the flag was unfurled. You could see it for miles.
And despite the lies of both the Israelis and the Americans for the decades that followed, we now know that the Israelis had positively identified the USS Liberty as an American vessel, something that has been confirmed now with recordings of the pilot's communications. The crew felt comfortable in the knowledge that the Israelis were aware of their location in the dangerous region and able to identify them, which is probably why they were so bewildered when on that sunny day they witnessed the inexplicable.
The attack was obviously deliberate. I consider it just cold-blooded murder of American sailors that day.
3 hours after Larry Weaver would wave at the smiling pilot, as sailors sunbathed on the deck of the USS Liberty, 2 unmarked Israeli fighters launched missiles directly at them without warning.
I saw them come at us. In fact, I was looking through the porthole when the jets came down and leveled off on us at attack attitude.
To my surprise, there were red flashes under the wings, and missiles, rockets started hitting the ship.
But that would not be the end of the attack. The Israeli jets began strafing the deck with machine guns as the crew of the Liberty ran for cover.
We were under attack. We could hear these shells hitting the ship. The whole ship would ring. It was like you were on the inside of a huge bell and someone beating on it with a sledgehammer.
The Liberty immediately attempted to radio for help, but in addition to the damage caused by the assault to their antennas, their radio transmissions had also been jammed.
You'd have to know what frequencies we were going to come up on. To know that, you'd have to know that we were an American ship.
They were jamming both our distress frequencies and our tactical frequencies. The tactical frequencies is all right, but the international distress frequencies is a violation of international law to jam them, and the Israelis were jamming them.
This was no mistake. The Israelis knew exactly who they were attacking, and declassified documents now show that order came straight from the top.
We now know the order came from Mayush Dayan. We have declassified CIA cable exposing his order.
After the initial assault, the pilots asked permission to unleash a new weapon on the Liberty. An order to napalm the defenseless ship was given. Remember, at this time, and ever since, Israel was considered our ally. While the Liberty burned with napalm, 2 Israeli warboats approached and began discussing with the pilots who would get to finish her off. Several torpedoes were launched. One found its mark, killing 25 American crew members in an instant. The ship was severely disabled, but the crew was trapped. When the Americans attempted to abandon ship, the Israeli Navy opened fire on the lifeboats with 50 caliber machine guns.
3 inflatable life rafts that remained seaworthy were dropped over the side and were machine gunned by the motor torpedo boats.
With body parts strewn all over the deck and blood streaming down the bulkheads of the wounded Liberty, the Israeli torpedo boats circled its prey, firing armor-piercing projectiles into her hull, resulting in the killing and wounding of nearly 2/3 of the Americans on board.
This is part of an armor-piercing shell. The outer portion or jacket makes the hole that this then goes through. And a bullet like this that hit Seaman Francis Brown and killed him.
He died right on the spot. Just fell to the floor dead. He was just barely 18.
During the assault, one of the surviving Marines was able to wire a makeshift antenna and get a Mayday message out to a nearby American fleet.
My RMs, not knowing any better during the strafing runs, were stringing long wires so that we could get an SOS out. And thanks to them, the ones that survived, we did get an SOS out to the USS America.
The Israelis intercepted the message, and fearing the Americans were sending out fighters to respond, called off the attack and summoned the American naval attaché and claimed they had made a terrible mistake. And word must have traveled fast, because President Johnson himself personally demanded that the fighters responding to the cries for help coming from the Liberty were to be recalled.
Robert McNamara ordered the aircraft recalled. He challenged the order, and Lyndon Johnson came on. Said he didn't give a damn if the ship sunk. He would not embarrass his allies.
This was the worst attack on a U.S. naval vessel since World War II, and the response from the Americans was to cover it up. The Mockingbird media barely mentioned the attack, calling it a friendly fire incident. The Johnson administration discussed sinking the Liberty so that it couldn't be photographed. Survivors were threatened.
The Navy told the Liberty survivors never to talk about the attack to anyone, including our families.
Repercussions for violating these orders to silence could result in your court-martial, imprisonment for violating national security, or worse.
NSA agents even camped out at their homes to ensure the press blackout. Israel hired journalists to plant pro-Israel stories in the media and threatened to accuse anyone who leaked the story of the Liberty with cries of anti-Semitism and blood libel. The inquiry was shut down, testimony erased, and for decades, those involved in the Johnson administration and the Israelis lied about the incident. Nobody ever asked why Israel would attack an American ship with unmarked jets and jam its communications. They never asked why they went to extreme measures to try to make sure there were no survivors on a ship they knew with certainty belonged to the Americans. Something that only seems to make sense if Israel intended to blame the attack on someone else. Had the Liberty not been able to get its transmission successfully out to the American fleet, would the attack have been blamed on the Egyptians?
Had it sunk, I assume when debris washed ashore the next day, it would have been blamed on Egypt. Many, many miracles that day.
I never myself accepted the Israeli purported explanation. Accidents don't occur through repeated attacks by surface vessels and by aircraft. It obviously was a decision taken pretty high up on the Israeli side.
Would the Americans have been lied into another war to fight on the side of those who attack them? Once again, now that enough time has passed to ensure that nobody will pay for their crimes, the truth finally trickles out, and the guilty parties are pleased at the complete absence of a reaction from the American people. Because after all, history is written by the victors, and if there's anything that's as clear as that morning in 1967, it's that liberty never had a chance.
The ultimate lesson of the Liberty attack was that it had far more effect on policy in Israel than in America. Israel's leaders concluded that nothing they might do would offend the Americans to the point of reprisal. If America's leaders did not have the courage to punish Israel for the blatant murder of American citizens, it seemed clear that their American friends would let them get away with almost anything.
For Blackpilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. You can click the notification bell so you know when I post new videos. You can also donate using patreon.com/Blackpilled or send crypto to the addresses below.
שתפו את הסרטון הזה כמה שיותר, כי תקשיבו רגע, אני שירתתי כסמב"צית חי"ר במהלך מלחמת צוק איתן, אני שירתתי באוגדת עזה, כל השירות שלי היה תומכת לחימה בזמן מלחמת צוק איתן שעזה הייתה באוגדת עזה. תקשיבו לי ותקשיבו לי טוב, אין מצב בעולם שיכולה להיות כזאת התקרבות לגדר, אוקיי? מבלי שאנחנו לא נדע מזה. התצפיתניות יושבות בבונקרים 4 שעות, הן לא יכולות לעשות ככה. הן מול מסך. לא יכול להיות מצב, שום מצב, שהיו מעירים אותי בלילה על יונה. על חסידה שהתקרבה לגדר, על מקק שעבר מתחת לגדר, היו מקפיצים את כל הגזרה. איך נכנסו עם טרקטורים, 400 איש ואף אחד לא שם לב.
Your support for Israel is going to exacerbate the problems inside your own countries. Because the same way that you have to rigidly control the media narrative about Palestine in order to get anyone to believe it. But social media is making that impossible, by the way. But the same way that you have to do that, you have to also rigidly control the public themselves. You have to crack down. You have to restrict freedom of speech. You have to repress your own people in order to be able to continue with your stance on Israel. Because like I said, no one is actually on board with this. Whether they're against it because they have a moral objection to supporting a brutal apartheid state, or whether it's because they're just sick of you sending all their money to help everyone else except your own citizens. People are fed up. This isn't going to work anymore. Why you can't do anything today that more instantly identifies you as an unthinking, hypocritical sellout, changing your profile picture to the Israeli flag? I mean, if you do that, then I already know that you were one of those people who was probably wearing a COVID face mask during a Zoom call back in 2020, because you're an automaton. You think whatever power tells you to think, and you have no internal value system of your own.